Okay, good evening, and we are starting our weekly halacha class. We are up to chapter 7 in Birchas Seder Birchas Ananin from the Alter Rebbe. Chapter 7 deals with the blessing of Shehakol. Right, so we spoke last week about the blessing of Eitz and Hadama, the fruit of the tree and the fruit of the ground. What exactly? Right, is that last week? About the different types of trees and bushes and plants, berries and things like that. And today we speak about the bracha of Shehakol. So that's the first half of the chapter. And in the second half, we talk about different soups, right? If you cook a soup with different foods in it, and you're drinking the actual soup, you're not drinking eating the vegetables or the meat or the barley in it. So then also, is that Shehakol or not? So that's going to be the second half of the chapter. We're not going to go through the entire chapter, but a longer chapter, 24 halachas, and lots of different opinions. It gets kind of complicated, but we're going to kind of go through it to get a general overview on these laws. Okay, starting with Shehakol. Perek Zayin Halacha 1. The blessing Shehakol Niyabin Varei is recited on all foods that do not grow from the earth. For example, the meat of domesticated and wild animals, fowl, fish, milk, cheese, eggs, water, salt, honey, right? These are all things. It's a wide range of a category, but it's anything not from the ground. Not from the ground. You make a Shehakol. Similarly, one recites the blessing Shehakol before eating mushrooms and truffles. Mushrooms are Shehakol. You knew that? But why are mushrooms Shehakol? Seemingly mushrooms, where do they grow? They grow from the ground. Although they grow from the earth, they do not grow from the earth itself, but from the moisture on it. Moreover, they also grow on wood and on utensils. Since they are not nurtured from the earth, but rather from the atmosphere, they are not considered the fruit of the earth, and therefore the blessing Shehakol Niyabin is recited over them. So all types of mushrooms, I believe, I think all, whatever it is, many types of mushrooms, we always make a Shehakol on the mushrooms. Okay? Halacha 2 deals with other foods that had a different blessing. They had a mezainis, they were ha'etz, or whatever it is, but the quality deteriorated. They became like ruined or something. Where it's still edible, you can still eat it. If it's not edible, then you make a bracha. It's still edible, but it doesn't have the same quality. So then also, you would also make a Shehakol on that food as well. So that's
an overly ripe banana, maybe?
Overly ripe banana could be if it's like edible, but it's really not like really what a banana should be like. Your child doesn't want to take that banana to school, right? In fact, it's the banana that came home from childhood school. So too, whenever the quality of a food has deteriorated, like bread became somewhat moldy, or a food's appearance changed and deteriorated slightly, its blessing is downgraded from the specific blessing designated for it. Instead, the general blessing that includes all food, is recited over it. If, however, the food has spoiled entirely, to the extent that it is not fit to be eaten at all, even with difficulty, then no blessing is recited over it. The same rule applies to bread that has become entirely moldy, meaning if it's not really edible. So even though you're pushing yourself and you're eating it, but it's not something which is something done. It was even with difficulty, not really done, then you don't make a bracha. But if it's something that even with a kid, it's a little difficult, but you can eat it, then you'll make a Shehakol. So it doesn't really give a very defined definition of like, so what does that mean? Like, what is considered that it is spoiled somewhat, or it deteriorated in quality? So I don't know. The answer to that, I really don't know exactly what that means, but I guess on your own you kind of assume, is this something that has that quality of the banana, of the apple, of the fruit, of the bread? This is like, oh, this is like, this is still considered bread, and then I'll make a matzah or mezainis on it. Or it's kind of moldy. I can still eat it, whatever, but it's not really something that most people desire to eat. I can't really serve it to others. So then perhaps you make a shahak. Exactly what is the line? I don't know. Doesn't say. Similarly, by the way, is this translation the exact same as that?
Yeah.
Similarly, when the flavor of wine has so soured to the extent that people refrain from drinking it because of its sour taste, the blessing shahakol yabdavadi should be recited over it. And this is unfortunately with some of the cheaper kosher wines, not so uncommon, right? You buy a wine, it costs you $4, $5, $6. And if it's not, maybe it's kept in a cool temperature or whatever it is, it very often goes bad. So it depends how bad it is. If it's like whatever, it's missing some of its great quality, I think then you still make a hagafen on it. But if it's like bad, where like you can still drink it, but it's really not like a wine taste. Like it's like you would kind of force yourself to drink it. And sometimes you almost like feel like you made kiddush and like you're kind of forcing something. This is really not. This is really. So truth is, if you know it ahead of time and you want to drink it, you make a shakalan. You don't make a hagafen. That doesn't have that quality, right? The whole idea of a hagafen is that because it's chashuv, because it's special. So it's upgraded in quality. It's better. So something special, you make a special blessing. We don't make the regular shahakal as you make in other drinks. You make hagafen. But if it doesn't have that quality, then you make a shahakal. Now, if it turned into actual vinegar, that's spoiled. Where it's already vinegar, it became so strong that when it cast on the ground, now what is the definition of vinegar? If you cast it on the ground, it will bubble and effervesce. No blessing at all should be recited over it, because it will harm one who partakes of it, and it is not fit to drink at all. Like similar to what we said earlier, like last week, about oil, right? Oil should, I think I also mentioned it again, oil really should have its own blessing, but because it's dangerous, it's not healthy for a person to drink oil on its own. So we don't make any blessing. Same is true with vinegar. We shouldn't be drinking vinegar on its own. So if we do not make a blessing. If one mixes it with water until it's fit to drink, then the blessing shakon and everybody is recited over it, right? So if you're able to drink it, but not as wine, but as vinegar, it's like diluted vinegar, then you make a shahakal. The point is like this: once it loses its quality, it's already shahakal. If it's not edible or drinkable, then you don't make a blessing over it. If it is drinkable, then you make a blessing, but the blessing is shahakal. Halacha 3. Similarly, the blessing shakol and yabadvari is recited over beverages that are made by cooking produce in water. Indeed, the blessing shakol and yabadvari is even recited over beer made from barley instead of the blessing of barley meaning desires, because it is a clear liquid that is meant to be drunk. Right? So I'm not drinking the actual or eating the actual fruit, but it's just the juice of the fruit. Right? So the juice of the fruit, because fruit generally are eaten raw. So now I made plum sauce, not plum sauce. I think plum sauce is the actual plum, right? You crush the plum, but it's just the juice of the fruit. What's an example of that? We also have beer. Another example, if you, you cook apples, and the intention is not to eat the apple. The intention is just to have the apple juice, but it's not the apple juice. It's the water that has the apple. The taste of the apple. You also make a shahakal on it. Okay. Halacha 4, 5, 6. The halacha 4, 5, and 6 talks about wine. Again, wine. When is wine hagaf and when is wine shahakal? So halacha 4 talks about what happens if it's somewhat, either the look, something, it doesn't look well, it doesn't look like wine, or maybe it tastes like wine but doesn't look like wine, or it looks like wine but doesn't taste like wine, right? So what bracha do you make on it? So halacha 4 tells us that you always go by the taste. If it tastes like wine, even though it doesn't look so good, then you still make hagafen. Wine whose aroma resembles vinegar, but that tastes like wine, is halachically still considered wine, and its blessing does not change. If, however, it tastes like vinegar, the blessing shakon is recited over it, even though its aroma resembles wine. So you basically go by how it tastes. If it tastes like wine, you make a bracha like wine. Halacha 5 just tells us that even revushal wine is also considered wine, and we make the hagafen. And Halacha 6 talks about what happens if I dilute wine, if it's mixed with water, and over here also we say we go by the taste. If it tastes like wine, we still make a bracha on hagafen on it, and if the taste is still, if the taste has not changed, right? It's like a kind of like an equal taste. Then you go by what is the majority. Is the majority wine, or the majority is the other liquid? Okay. Let's skip to Halacha 7. Halacha 7 talks about when we're making shahakal on beverages. The shahakal on beverages is only if we're drinking the beverages because we are thirsty. We're enjoying, it's quenching our thirst. But if we're drinking for other reasons, then we don't make a bracha. Let's read this inside. Halacha 7. The blessing shahakal yav should not be recited before drinking water, nor the blessing afterward, unless one drinks because he is thirsty. If, however, one drinks to swallow a cheekful of food that is causing him to choke, he should not recite a blessing neither beforehand or afterwards, for a person only derives satisfaction from drinking water when he is thirsty. Now, this is specifically water, right? Because water has no taste on its own. So water, you don't have any benefit, you don't have any enjoyment, satisfaction of drinking water unless you're thirsty. If you're not thirsty and drinking water, no one drinks water. I can't say no one, but generally, most people don't drink water if they're not thirsty. Hey, I want a cup of water. Why? You're not thirsty, right? I'll have a cup of cream soda, even though I'm not thirsty, because it tastes good, right? So I'm enjoying it. But water, I only drink if I'm thirsty. Very hot, right? There's some satisfaction of the water itself, right? So therefore, if I have some food and I need some water to get it down, I'm choking or something, I'm taking a pill, right? All I need, I'm just using the water as a tool, a vehicle to continue eating. Then I don't make a bracha. If I'm thirsty, I make a bracha. With regards to other beverages, by contrast, a person who drinks them also derives physical satisfaction from their flavor. Therefore, he must recite a blessing before and after drinking them, even though he does not desire them and is not partaking of them because he wants to, but because he is forced to, for example, because he's choking on a chicken of food. Even in that situation, at the end of the day, you're enjoying you're enjoying the flavor. So therefore, you have to make a bracha regardless. So if you're trying to take a pill, right? Recently, I started taking some more vitamins. So certain vitamins, for some reason, when I drink water, first of all, the pill starts dissolving in my mouth already, so it leaves a bad taste. And for whatever reason, it gives me a little harder time to swallow it. But if I take, let's say, a Diet Coke, for some reason, it just flows down easier. I'm not sure what the science behind this is, right? So according to this, if I was just drinking some water to help the pill go down, and I'm not thirsty, I wouldn't make a bracha. But even having a little sip of Diet Coke, because the Diet Coke has a taste, then I do make a bracha. Right? Obviously, if you already made a bracha before, from eating something that is shahakal, I already made a bracha. That's not a question. I'm saying if I haven't made a bracha yet, I'm just having a little pill, I'm having something that has a taste to it, like Jack Daniels or something like that, right? I still have to make a bracha. Similarly, Halacha Class talks about what happens when we consume medication. You make a bracha on that. Similar principle applies regarding all foods and beverages which a person eats or drinks for curative, how you pronounce that? Purposes. Curative? I like curative. Okay. If they have so right, so I'm not talking about a pill necessarily, because the pill necessarily is considered food. But let's say it's a certain food, an actual whatever it is, right? You're eating a certain medicinal purposes, like elderberry, right? Or whatever, you're eating something just because you're not enjoying it, you're just doing it because of medical reasons. If they have a pleasant flavor and the person enjoys their taste, he must recite a blessing before and after partaking of them, even if he does not desire to partake of them at all, and partakes of them only because he is forced to due to his illness. So you said elderberry, for example, or whatever it is, right? Now they have a taste to it. Now you might not like the taste. If you don't like the taste, and you're kind of just doing it because your doctor told you to do so, then you don't make a bracha. But if it's not a bad taste, and I kind of like it, right? Then even though you're no interest in eating it, other than the due to your illness, you still have to make a bracha. At the end of the day, you're enjoying some satisfaction from drinking or eating this particular food. If, however, they have an unpleasant taste, and he does not derive any satisfaction from them, although he is being healed through them, he should not recite a blessing before or after partaking of them. If they are neither tasty nor entirely bad tasting, there is an authority who maintains that one should always recite the blessing chocolate and everybody over them. So the parentheses it says that if it's just like what we say is pyro, right? There's no good taste, there's no bad taste, whatever, right? It's fine. So then some say there's an opinion. The opinion is that we should make a shahako over such a food. So that is if there's no good or bad taste. If it's something you're really not interested in and doesn't have a good taste, then you don't make a bracha. If it has a good taste and you have satisfaction, then you do make a bracha. Halacha 9. Similarly, when a sick person must eat on Yom Kippur, or when a person must eat forbidden food because of a danger to his life. Oh, so what if you have to eat something forbidden food, right? Something which is not kosher. If this is something that's going to save a person's life, obviously, we have to take any type of medication or any type of food. Someone's starving to death, and this is the only food that they have. You eat non-kosher, right? But do you make a bracha over it? Same question is if someone has to eat on Yom Kippur, a child has to eat on Yom Kippur, or someone who's sick, and the doctor says you can't fast. You have to eat every hour, every 2 hours. A pregnant woman who has to eat every once in a while, right? Nursing mother. So do you make a bracha? So the same thing applies. He must recite a blessing before and then afterwards because he's enjoying the food. This ruling applies even though he does not at all willingly derive satisfaction. It's only because he is forced to because of his illness. So that is in regards to eating non-kosher food when it is permissible, right? It's permissible to eat it. But the question is, I know satisfaction from it, right? I'm only eating it if I have to. But wait, at the end of the day, you're enjoying the food. It has a good taste. You make a bracha. There's a story. There's a man who's still alive. May he live and be well. His name is Nissim Mangel. He's a Holocaust survivor. And he tells over his story where he was, at one point, his family was hiding in like an attic somewhere. I don't know. Someone's house somewhere. I'm not sure where he's from. For a while, like a few months. Whatever, a long story, but eventually he was caught and taken to the camps. But at one point, he was starving. A few days went by. They didn't eat anything. The only food that they had, I guess someone brought to them, was some hot dogs, non-kosher hot dogs. So his father tells him, he was a child, telling him, listen, you have to eat. You're starved. A few days go by already. You have to eat this. Yeah, but it's not kosher. Yeah, it's not kosher, but we have to live, and that's what we have to do. He was like, no, I can't eat it. Like he was really like pushing it off. So there's actually, I think there's actually like a rabbi that was hiding with them. The rabbi came over to him and says, Rabbi, he says, listen, like I'm giving you a psak. I'm like giving you like a halachic like like I'm telling you, you have to. This is a mitzvah for you to eat. This is a mitzvah. Like this is what you have to do because saving a life is nothing more important than that. So he ate it. He ate the hot dog. I'm not sure if he made a blessing or not, but he said like an hour later, he vomited. He said his body was just like so like trained, I guess, as a young child already, that like kosher is like the most important thing, and they can't, you can't eat non-kosher. Either way, but the point is, here's the real question. The real question is, or not the real question, but a question is that I get pretty often. Every once in a while, I'll get this question: what if someone is eating non-kosher? Not because they're forced to, but they want to. Do you make a blessing? I had this question. Someone says that, listen, I'm in a situation in my life where I can't, my family, whatever, I can't keep kosher. So it's not possible. I can't just not eat at home, and my wife's not willing to do kosher, and I'm not like, even though perhaps on his own he would be more careful with what he eats, but he's eating non kosher, right? But he wants to, he's trying to grow in his Judaism. This question is, do I make a blessing? Do I wash my hands before I'm motzi? Do I make a blessing? That's the question. The question is not in the case where it's permissible to eat it, but you're only eating it because of an illness. Here it's not permissible, right? It's forbidden. They're doing a sin. You're not allowed to take a bite. Do you make a blessing? Because you're having a pleasure in God's world. So that's the question. So I think the answer is that you don't make a blessing. Because at the end of the day, at the end of the day, God does not want you to take this bite. God does not want you to consume this food. So you're having a pleasure, but you're having the whole idea of the blessing is, I'm thanking God, thank you for giving this to me. But God doesn't want you to eat it. Right? The question would be if something which is, like washing your hand before bread. Obviously, we only eat bread that has a hechsher. You want to make sure it's baked with a kosher oven and no non-kosher ingredients and whatever. But to say that a piece of bread is not, it's like treif, to say it's like not kosher, I can't say for sure it's not kosher, right? No, it's not kosher. It's more questionable, right? It's very possibly non-kosher. So if someone wanted to make hamotzi or bread, I can't say that's a problem. But like something which is really non-kosher, right? No question about it. I don't think they should be making a blessing over that food. What's the question?
Oh no, but it's kind of off the topic actually. Sorry.
Okay, let's skip to Halacha 11. What time is it? I don't have time.
10, 12.
10, 12. Okay, Halacha 11. Here we talk about the juice of fruit, and what we say is that the juice of the fruit is not like the fruit itself, and then we make a shahakol on the juice. However, the exception to the rule is the wine and the oil, and we'll see how that works. Halacha 11. Whenever fruits were squeezed to extract their juice, the juice does not have the fruit's status with regard to the blessing recited over them. Therefore, the blessing Borei Pri Ha'etz is not recited over fruit juice. Instead, the blessing Shakol Nyabedvaro is recited over it. Therefore, this blessing should be recited over beverages like Visniak, which is a cherry brandy, am I pronouncing it right? And Malignac, type of med, like a beer. Either way, these are examples that were brought in the Shulchan Aruch, but obviously there's any fruit juice. We make a shachol. Olives and grapes are exceptions. Liquids that are squeezed from them have the same status as they do, and it would be fitting to recite the blessing Borei Pri Ha'etz on liquids produced from them. So, in theory, we would make ha'etz on grape juice or wine, juice from grapes, and olive oil, juice from oil. But nevertheless, it continues. The blessing Baruch is not recited over wine, nor commonly over oil. Now we'll see soon. He'll give us a scenario where you would make a blessing over oil. We'll get to that soon. Since wine is important, our sages established a separate, specific blessing for it. So it wouldn't be ha'etz because it's something special. But it's so special that not only is ha'etz, we actually upgrade it to another special blessing, the blessing of hagafen. A blessing should not be recited over olive oil when one drinks it by itself because it is harmful to its body. If one partakes of it with bread or mixes it together, with other liquids, for example, it is common to mix it with beer. The bread or the other beverages are considered a primary importance. A blessing should be recited over them, and that blessing covers the olive oil. So, what is the scenario of drinking olive oil? You drink olive oil all the time, but we eat it or drink it with other foods, either with bread or a salad, or maybe mixing it with other beverages or whatever it is. But the point is that the other foods are the primary food, and therefore the blessing of the bread is said over and covers the oil. The blessing of the salad is said and covers the oil. So you don't make a separate blessing over the oil. What is a scenario where you would say a blessing of ha'etz on oil? There is an exception to this rule. One who has a sore throat and intends to heal it by drinking a mixture oil and other beverages. Okay, so I never tried this, and the nurse in the house maybe to help us out of here. But evidently, it seems like that there's some type of remedy to a sore throat if you mix oil with some other beverages and you drink the oil, and it helps your throat. So even though the oil is a lesser part of the mixture, so obviously you have to dilute it because so it's the lesser part of the mixture. Nevertheless, it is considered its primary element because he is drinking the mixture with a curative intent, right? You're doing it because of the oil. Ultimately, you want the oil, which is diluted, but that's the main ingredient over here. Therefore, you should recite the blessing by over the mixture, and thereby cover the other beverages which are auxiliary tafel, which are secondary. Right. So the point is that this will be a scenario where you're drinking oil. It's healthy because it's diluted, but you don't make the blessing of the 51% because over here the oil is the primary ingredient. So that would be a scenario where you make ha'etz on oil. Okay, any questions? We still have quite a bit to cover in chapter 7. And the truth is, from here on to the end is very typical, like we have over here many times, very detail-oriented, very back and forth, 2 opinions, 3 opinions, and what's the halacha, and when you do it, lachatchila, and it gets kind of complicated. It deals with soups, right? Really deals a lot with soups, and it goes into like very, very detailed with different types of soups and different ingredients, and how is it cut up, how is it mushed, and what's the intent? Right? Do you intend for the food of for the food, the solids? Do you intend for the liquid? Do you intend for both? And so it gets in many different opinions. That's why it's so long. So therefore, I think it'll be easier if we just do this kind of orally. I use here this guy over here, Rabbi Kadasi, basically like summarizes a lot of what it says in these halachas into just like 2 pages. So kind of go over, make it a little easier. Okay. So we have a soup.
I'm sorry.
Yeah,
real
question.
quick. So one of the things I think I've learned along the way that with any kind of like nut or fruit or something like that, if it's been ground up, smushed up, like it loses its look.
Right.
That seems to be a rule of thumb that it becomes a shahapul.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Like peanut butter.
Yeah. Peanut butter. Question is, for example, like applesauce. Right.
I would have thought that would be shahapul.
So generally we say shahapul on applesauce. I'm not sure like sometimes you can make it, so you do a homemade applesauce where like it's kind of piecey,
Actually, chunky.
and it's chunky, and you see kind of the fruit in there, and then that might be how it's.
Yeah, like chunky peanut butter too. It has the little bits of peanuts you can actually see the peanuts.
So that's a good question. How, if it's actual peanuts, you probably have to make hadama. All nuts. Which bracha do you make on nuts generally? Right. Yeah. So the way to remember it is all nuts are tree nuts except for peanuts. Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about soup. You have a vegetable soup, you have a chicken soup, you have a what type of soup do you make? A mushroom soup. You have a what?
A chili? Yeah, that's a good question. Like a chili, like with ground meat.
Ground meat, okay. So let's go through some of these things, some of the rules, and then we kind of see each of these soups, what blessing we make on it. So we start with vegetable soup. Okay. And when we say vegetable soup, we are talking about vegetables that generally are not eaten raw. So potato, squash, corn, green beans, onions. Onions. Let's take onions out for a second.
Kidney beans.
Right. So these are vegetables, right? Vegetables are very hadama, right? These are the blessing on it, hadama. You can't really eat them raw. In contrast to fruits, like a fruit soup or a fruit, I don't know what, where you're putting in actual fruits that could be eaten raw. That's a whole different discussion. We're talking about vegetables, right? And all you have in it is only vegetables. There's no meat and there's no grain, just vegetables, right? Right. There's many different vegetable soups, right? So, what bracha do you make on the vegetable soup? So obviously, if you're actually eating the vegetables, you make hadama. And even if it's ground up, what do you call it? We call it a zhuzi in my house. You puree it, right? You take the potatoes, you take the squash, you take the whatever zucchini or mushroom, whatever it is, and you puree it. You liquid, right? You make it right. So now the whole liquid is all vegetable. So of course you make hadama as well over there. You make hadama. Even this is unique to vegetables. Even if you have not pureed it, it's just liquid. It's water.
Vegetable broth.
Vegetable broth that has no actual vegetable, than just the taste. So I have a soup. I threw in some vegetables, and I cooked it. I boiled it. Now I'm just having the broth. You still make a hadama. You make a hadama on the liquid. Why? Because it's interesting. It says because most people don't serve soup in that manner. They usually serve soup where the vegetables are in the soup itself, in the broth itself. So therefore, even though you're doing something different, you're drinking in the soup itself, the broth itself, without the vegetables, you are an exclusion to the rule, and therefore you still make a hadama on the entire soup. Okay. Now, again, this is only if there's only vegetables in it. If you throw in a piece of meat, so meat does not have that rule, because generally meat, the meat becomes the main thing here. But therefore, the broth itself, without the meat or chicken in it, is shahako.
Even if it's with the vegetable broth.
So now, even if it's with the vegetable broth, now the broth is shahako. Again, we're talking about when just broth without any vegetables in it. So, for example, a very common example is in a Jewish home is a chicken soup, right? So chicken soup, generally, you throw in some chicken, and you have some vegetables, whatever the vegetables are, right? You put in onion, you put in some celery, you put in some carrots, you put in some whatever, right? So here you have just, I'm not eating the chicken, I'm not eating the vegetable, I'm just having some of the broth. You make a shahako. because the chicken is in there. If there was a hariv chicken soup, that even makes sense, right? Then, I mean, if it's a vegetable soup, basically, then you make a adam. But once you have the chicken in there, then you make a shahako. Now, if I'm eating the vegetable in the soup, so I got a bowl of soup, there's broth, maybe there's some chicken also,
Chicken broth.
and then I put in some carrots. In my bowl, I have some carrots. In my bowl, I have some zucchini. I have some yellow squash. I have some potato, whatever, right? So do I make a separate blessing on the vegetables? So here, it seems like there are kind of
chicken in the bowl too. Sorry.
even though there's chicken in the bowl, right? So there's different opinions of, is it considered like one mixture, and therefore you just make a shahakal and everything, or do you make two separate blessings? And it seems like the halacha would be that depending how, like if it's like big pieces, I know with a chicken soup, very often you don't really cut the pieces. It's like big chunks of pieces. So then you'll make a separate blessing if you're actually eating the vegetable itself. So then you make a blessing hadama on the actual vegetable. If you're not eating the vegetable, you're only eating the broth or the chicken or both, then you make a shahako.
If the vegetables are pureed, but the chicken is not.
If the vegetables are pureed, then you do make hadama, because you're eating the vegetable itself.
And a shahako, or is that just for the chicken meat? Yeah.
I'm sorry, I'm taking that back. If you puree the vegetables, you go by what is the roi, what is 51%. So if you have much more chicken than the vegetable, you make a shot. Chicken and water, right? I'm assuming you do, because the water before you puree is water, right? So if that's 51%, you make a shahako. If the vegetables are if the hadama is more than the shahako, then you make a hadama. That's because it's pureed. But if it's not pureed, just chicken, broth, and vegetables.
Like a tomato soup with chicken.
It's tomato soup with chicken. I'm assuming you don't add a lot of water into tomato soup, right? Or maybe you do.
I mean, I guess I'm thinking more. So if I'm served it at a table, I'm seeing pureed vegetable broth and chicken in there.
Right.
Now,
right. Well, tomato is actually considered a fruit in this regard, because it's eaten raw. So fruits are a little bit different. Right. That is true. So in Shulchan Aruch, like I mentioned last time, we refer to carrots as something that they don't eat raw. But you're right. Today, some people say a carrot would be considered like a fruit. And celery, yeah. But there are other vegetables. I think like zucchini or yellow squash that people don't really eat that raw, right? Yeah. Now, if you also have grain in the soup, I'm not sure what type of soup that would be that has not rice. We're talking about the 5 grains. Some of that you add later. Yeah.
Dumplings or pasta. Now, I'm remembering you just add flour just to thicken the broth. That's not a mazonas, it's a shahako, right?
So if you're adding the So I'm looking it up because it's like complicated. If you're adding the noodles or the croutons or something afterwards, but if you're adding it afterwards, then you make a separate blessing because it's considered like two separate things, especially that the main intent in the soup is not for the noodles, it's for the soup. You're just adding it. So you make a blessing on the noodles or the croutons separately. If it's cooked with it in it, then because mezainis always becomes the main part of the dish, therefore then the whole soup will become a mezainis. However, it says, similar to what we said earlier, if there's like a lot of large pieces of meat or chicken in the soup, so when you take a bite of that piece, you can make a separate shahakol. Because it's like a separate piece of almost. But if you just kind of, everything is kind of small pieces mixed together, you also have some grain in there, the whole soup becomes a mezainis. So that is a little bit about that soup. What's interesting is that this idea that the broth of cooked vegetables have the same blessing of it, and it's also hadama, only applies to water, which has no taste on its own. So with other liquids that has its taste, then the broth would still be shahako. So for example, when you pickle something in vinegar, right? You take a cucumber and you make it into a pickle, right? You pickle something. So now the pickle juice is not considered hadama. The pickle juice is shahako, right? Well, because it has its own taste. Has its own, even though now, I mean, even I wouldn't have drinking it before on its own, but now I'm drinking it because it has the taste of the pickles in it. But at the end of the day, it always had its own taste. So therefore, you'll make a shahakal on that. I don't know if you drink pickle juice. I actually do drink pickle juice once in a while. And
well, yeah, so I guess if you want to use an oil base instead of a water based soup, right?
Well, it comes oily. You shouldn't be drinking that. You shouldn't be eating that soup.
Like it's like chicken oil, yeah. Don't know. It's more juices from the meat than
So just to qualify, to add to that idea of having grain, it says over here that if we have like full kernels that aren't ground, like barley kernels or something, right, in our soup, then we make two blessings. We make the shahako and the bezana separately because grain is meant to be used through eaten through grinding it and making it into a powder flour. So anytime we don't process it that way, then we I'm sorry, I'm getting all confused over here. If you remember, going back to the beginning, we said that full grain, right, is hadama, not even shahaka. It's not even mezainis, right? Mezainis is only when it's made into a flour and baked. Otherwise, it's hadama. If I put full grain into my soup, then it does not have the mezainis status. So I make two separate blessings. I make a shahaka on the soup, and I make hadama on the vegetables. Exactly. On the grain. Hadama on the grain. On the grain, I make hadama. Because it's not, or vegetables also.
Right, that's grain and vegetables.
That's fine, it's the same blessing. Yeah. I'm saying we don't make a mezainis. If I have like real mezainis that I put into the soup, putting noodles in the soup, or something that's already mezainis, or if it's flour because I want to have a texture or something, then I guess that kind of also then it'll be in the Zenos.
So I thought I remembered us going over that if a flour, like if you add flour to a soup to thicken it, it's not.
It's the reason why you're putting it in. Just like you don't want the actual
flavor,
it's just the effect, right? We spoke about like using it to just have a for the texture a little bit, but not for the actual flavors. Then doesn't count. But here we're talking about we do want it for itself. Whatever. So I think we'll stop over here in regards to soup. There's many more scenarios and soup. We'll stop over here. That is basically chapter 7. And next time we'll do chapter 8, which is maybe chapter 8 and 9. We covered 2 because it's a little bit of a shorter one. Chapter 8 is talking about the after blessing. And chapter 9 talks about not making any interruptions while we're eating, like we spoke about, like this, just waiting, right? The 72 minutes, but then like, what if I start eating over here and I'm finishing eating over there? I'm walking, I'm going from place to place. I started my meal over here. I'm finishing in someone else's house. Did I make another blessing? Did I make another after blessing? So a lot of these laws are in chapter 9. So hopefully next time we'll be able to do chapter 8 and 9. Then we got just a few more until we're done. Okay.